spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David Ige.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Longstrugs.
Well, good morning and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Ryan Kalei Suji, joined by Yanji Denise, and this is Spotlight Hawaii on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. This morning, we're going to be spotlighting Aloha Stadium, of course, a project that has been in the news for the last year or so, but a surprise twist and an announcement that came out from the governor that caught many people by surprise.
Right, that announcement expanded on here on our show. You can go back and watch that broadcast from just about a week ago. The governor basically saying that private financing is no longer needed, that the legislature has allocated enough funds to do this in a different way, and moving authority perhaps from DAGS to DBED. So joining us now to talk about all of this is Chris Kinimaka, Public Works Administrator for DAGS, and Ryan Andrews, Aloha Stadium Manager. Thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Pleasure to be here.
So, Chris, I want to start with you. The governor's announcement taking a lot of folks by surprise. Some people saying they felt they were blindsided. Can you tell us about how you found out about this proposed change and what your interactions have been thus far with the governor's office?
Yes, thank you. We were notified by email, no less, exactly 2 weeks ago from the chief of staff. And the email went directly to Comptroller Otaguro. I happen to be one of the copied recipients of the email, and it just basically quickly said that the administration has decided they're going to be moving in a different direction without us under DBED, and that we should not be going forward with our RFP and start to tie up loose ends. And then it thanked us for our past, work on this project, and that was the end of the story. It didn't copy the stadium or stadium authority either. So the reason we say it was a surprise is because our comptroller Otaguro has been very diligent about going back to the administration, going back to the governor, and very clearly saying, we'd like direction, we'd like input. Do you want us to continue? Can we get the green light to issue our RFPs because we're ready? And if not, please tell us to stop. And at no time did the governor say stop. And in fact, he said, just hang on until we have a big meeting with all the stakeholders so we can all be on the same page. So it was a surprise to suddenly get an email for message on direction that we've been waiting for about 2 years.
Wow. And Ryan, how about you? Can you tell us about what the Stadium Authority has been informed of up until this point?
Well, yeah, similar to what Chris explained, obviously, I think everyone in the authority is surprised. We have not received any formal notice about the change other than what Chris had shared through the comptroller. And then, of course, we saw the front page the day after saying change in direction. So I can imagine this next Stadium Authority board meeting will be a lively one with lots of questions. Questions in terms of what is this new direction, because we haven't heard what that direction is. What is the plan? And then what are the impacts of that plan to things like schedule, to things like scope, and just overall impacts. I am hopeful, or trying to be hopeful, that this plan, whatever it is comprehensive and includes a key goal that our authorities had since the beginning, which is it also covers the long-term maintenance of the stadium, because we don't want to be in the situation we're in today, where we have a stadium that's basically, unusable because of deferred maintenance.
Chris, coming back to you, you mentioned just the way in which this information came about, and so what have you folks been doing with this project? Has that everything just essentially been on hold, or are you still proceeding in some areas? What are the conversations like with the other stakeholders that are obviously involved in this? If you can give us an update of what's happened since you've received this email and information.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the first thing we did was reach out to all our stakeholders, because that's been our mode of operation. We're very collaborative, we're transparent and honest. We had a meeting with the IAEA Community Association not long after receiving the email. So we advised them of the content, but we also advised them that we will continue to represent the community and all of our stakeholders in future discussions. What we're continuing to do is our due diligence that we've started over the years, because there's still a lot of work and a lot of coordination required regardless of the direction the administration takes. So we're still going on with meetings that we'd already scheduled with, for example, the City and County of Honolulu elements, and with the utility companies, and with other community elements that are all tied into this process and really part of what it takes to make sure this project, however you push it forward, is successful, including things like, permitting and zoning and density of the site. So that work continues because the Stadium Authority is still our client, much like all of our other clients from other departments. And we're not going to just drop that relationship and stop our ship based on a single email from, frankly, not the governor.
Ryan, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. You said that you're concerned about the timeline. The governor seemed to indicate that he thinks that by doing it in this way, he will expedite the timeline. Do you agree with that?
I don't know what his plan is, but I can tell you that we are so far along in our procurement that we are ready to move and proceed. And we actually have been for quite some time. We've been waiting for that green light. So I think my concern is any change at this point will cause a delay or will cause us to have to start over. And that's what I would hate to see, is to start this process over and to kick this project out even further. That's not in the best interests of anybody, including the University of Hawaii, who, although they have the temporary Ching Field, they desperately need a stadium that is worthy of a Division I program. So I would just hate to see the schedule slip. And I think any change at this point is going to cause that.
And if I may, I can add some context to that. When our team moves forward with our procurement modeling, we didn't look at just one model. We looked at many different models. So when we hear some of the rumors going around, like design build or a modified P3, we do get concerned, because a lot of our work has been on collaboration based on the model that we see will work best for the community and for the University of Hawaii and all the stakeholders. So yes, any change that occurs now will delay the project. They'll pretty much have to start with procurement all over again, because you cannot take what we've developed, which honestly is 1,000-page request for proposals for the stadium alone, and pick pieces apart. So that's our concern. We don't know who the experts are that are helping the governor. We are disappointed that we weren't part of that because of the knowledge base and the partnerships that we bring. We could easily help advise them, but we are out of the picture. And so that's a lot of our concern, is what they slice and dice with, and the fact that we do believe it will be significant delays.
Chris, to address maybe some of what the governor has stated, and of course, again, for those viewers who weren't able to watch that interview that we had with the governor last week, we talked in length about this project. One of the things that he said is that, with the legislature allocating those funds for this project, that there really is no need for that private piece or being, really just relying on the funds that the legislature has already allocated for this project, unlike other projects in the past where they've had to sort of find financing. This project is essentially, with the stadium portion, is already been allocated. What would be, your argument against maybe why not to follow that pitch that the governor is saying, that this shouldn't be a private-public project?
But it's really simple economics. I think, in very simplistic terms, the $350 million construction estimate came from a 2017 update on a 2015 study. Anybody who knows the cost of construction and how that has been moving in the construction environment knows that what you could buy for $350 million in 2017 is not what you can buy in 2022 or 2024, when construction is likely to begin. Although we're not going to get more money then, that means that we're taking scope right out from the stadium. So that is the basis of our concern. Our own analysis on construction indices, for example, concrete and steel costs, shows that just from December of 2021 to this past June, the cost of the stadium escalated by $50 million. So if they're giving you exactly what you asked for in 2017, you're already behind the game. And then the other concern we have too is, if they're only building the stadium, then they're not talking about the infrastructure that goes with it, that connects it to Hart, which will be operational and takes care of the parking and the entry problems that we had even with the old stadium. So while you might have a shining new gem, its functional and operational capability is going to be hampered if some of that money isn't peeled off to take care of infrastructure. And that's where the P3 comes in. the P3 can make up the lack of funding for the basic stadium itself. We have also shown in our model that we can use some of the funding for infrastructure improvements so that the district can move side by side. We can help with the overall impact to the community, bring more community benefits, and start revenue generation much quicker.
And Ryan, if you could expand on that as well, what are your concerns about taking that private partnership piece out of this project?
Well, I think Chris really hit that hard with, if we have just $350 million to build a stadium, my concern is what's going to be included in that stadium, that scope, and will it meet all the different uses and needs that we have for that stadium? And I like to remind people that we're building more than just a football stadium. We are building a multi-use stadium that can accommodate a wide range of events, from soccer and rugby to concerts. And a lot of people don't realize that sports like soccer and rugby actually use a larger field, wider and narrower, and that's something we don't have today. So I don't want that to get cut out of the scope. Concert events are something we're trying to attract, and to do so, we're looking to have things like rigging as part of the infrastructure that supports, the speakers and the lights and the LED boards. And if that gets cut out of that project because of lack of funds, then how do we again sustain ourselves financially in the long term? So I'm concerned about that scope. But Chris brought up the broader perspective of it's more than just a stadium; it's connecting it to the wider community. And if we're just building a stadium and not taking care of the entry gates, exit gates, traffic plans, connectivity to heart, I think we're selling ourselves short.
Ryan, I just want to follow up in some of the meetings that you've had with the Stadium Authority through this process as a whole. How involved has the administration been? Has there been representatives that have been a part of this conversation that can help to understand the work that has been done thus far? If you can explain maybe the partnership that has already happened, or maybe that has not been there on behalf of the administration.
So the Stadium Authority delegated this project to DAGS, Public Works, which has been running the procurement from day one and has done an excellent job. And I know the comptroller has regular meetings with the governor to update him on kind of where we've been all the way through. And so I guess that's why the surprise came, is that we never heard early on to change direction or turn back. We're hearing that now. But that has been really the involvement of the administration to this point, is really more from meetings between the comptroller and the governor. The authority does have obviously participation in everything we've done in terms of how we've planned. And as I mentioned, making sure we are aligned with our overall vision and goals of the entire district and the long-term maintenance. So they've definitely been involved from the beginning.
Chris, I'm interested to know about, you said that we outlined that $350 million, but there's been already a lot of money spent to get to this point. The governor seemed to indicate that he thought that he could sort of take some of that work and transfer it over. What I'm hearing from you is that you can't really cherry pick those results. Talk about the money that's already spent and what we could be losing on that end from a financial perspective.
Yeah, definitely. From 2017, when we first got $10 million for the initial planning, and 2019 gave us another $20 million to continue that work for the whole district, we've already expended close to $25 million. Of that $25 million, $10 million of that would transfer over, because that's what we did for all of your due diligence planning, site selection, the environmental impact statement, and all of our work with zoning, for example. But outside of that, $15 million has been spent on outreach, collaboration, and education, specifically for public-private partnerships, because that is so new to Hawaii, and we have tremendous input from financial and legal experts. We've tapped all the different state and county agencies to buy into that. All of that is what we're talking about pushing on the side, and seemingly making decisions outside of the vacuum of all of that information. But that does not automatically transfer over to a new methodology, and that's our concern.
A big part of this conversation has also been the housing component. Of course, we've talked about the stadium, the entertainment district, but there has been some in the community, some also running for public office, that says that this should not be an entertainment district, that this should be used for the affordable housing crisis that the state currently sees itself in. What are your thoughts, Chris? We'll start off with you about some of the proposals about using this area for housing and integrating that with the project as a whole, and what that might look like realistically when factoring in some of these components of these housing numbers.
So starting off really quickly with, highest and best use of the property, especially when you look at the opportunity to revitalize a community, what they don't need is concentrated, dense housing. And I think if you'd like, you can start to show some of the renderings we did earlier this year when legislature started. Aloha Homes was pretty much trying to tell us to build 100,000 units on the site. We were quick to show that that's a bit ridiculous. And then by the end of the session, people were saying, let's look at 20,000 units. That still is not tenable for the site. You can see there isn't any open space, no gathering. This is not a live, work, play, thrive environment. And if you recall, the colors showed the height limits for those areas. The towers just obliterate all of that. But by this election season, you started to hear people say, let's put 10,000 units on the site. And I credit Representative Nakamura for calling me and saying, Chris, I like pictures. So show me what 10,000 units looks like. And basically what we did was say, let's be responsible. Let's take our open space master plan for this live, work, play community. And then we stacked the 10,000 units on top of our own rendering. So the orange units shows our own 3,000 to 4,000 residential mixed income units that we planned. And then all of the white that just got added on are the additional towers of what affordable housing would look like on the site. And we can go ahead and go to the next rendering, because this shows how this punches through all of the height limits right away. So you can see 250 feet on the red, 150 feet on green, and the aqua are 90 feet for the ceilings based on the county's own TOD plan for future zoning. The tower heights are shown, and the 6 tall towers show the heights that exceed the tallest buildings in Honolulu, now present in Kaka'ako. We propose this is still not tenable, and this view shows how many units would be in each tower. Even if you imagine just one person per unit, and keep in mind these are be for families, this is how many people will be unloading their cars and their activities into the district if you build just 10,000 units on the site. So this too is not tenable. We're showing here that on the top left, that's what it would look like if you look from Salt Lake Boulevard down across the property. So you lose that sight line. The top right-hand side is looking from Halawa Stream, the Makalapa neighborhood, looking Maka. That view gets obliterated. The bottom left corner is from the Lower Halawa parking lot, trying to find the new stadium, and that's a dark purple in the middle and the back. And then finally, on the bottom right-hand side, if you stand on top of the proposed new stadium and try to find Diamond Head in the back, that view plane is completely cut off as well, which again is not in our master plan concept. Thank you for going back to that. That shows the Malka Makai and Eva Cocoa Head view planes that we're sustaining. And this is what we're saying benefits the community, and this is what we have buy-in for. If you add 10,000 units to the site, where we've anticipated roughly $2.5 to $4.5 billion just to build those units, and then hundreds of millions of dollars for infrastructure that all of our projections show will not be able to sustain this kind of development, even with improvements. So very, very much not a realistic number.
Yeah, and Ryan, I'd like to get your thoughts on just the public trust and this obviously taking your agency and Chris's agency by surprise. But I know that, a lot of neighborhood board members and just community members have been very engaged in the process. And, not everybody wants this kind of development in their community. It's, I would imagine, taking you a while to get full adoption of this plan. Talk about sort of this shift now from the governor's office and what you are concerned about when it comes to the trust of the neighborhood.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll back up and just share with you that for several years now, probably 3 years, both Chris and I and others on our team have been attending both the neighborhood boards that are adjacent to our property, as well as the IAEA Community Association, to bring them along in our planning and our own due diligence. And they have been great partners, and they provided a lot of feedback and guidance and what they like and what they don't like. And, they support generally the overall plan that we've had. They want to see their community revitalized. They want to see, limited housing. And obviously they support a stadium as well and all the community spaces that come with it. My concern now is with this change of direction. Yeah, we're breaking that trust, and that's the concern. And we need to, one is kind of figure out what that plan is. And hopefully, as this plan has developed, we need to make sure the community has a voice in that. And that's what that's the concern I have. We don't want to break that trust. We've spent too much time building this relationship, and we don't want it to go down the drain. So we are continuing to communicate with the neighbors and bring them along. And like us, they have lots of questions. And so, again, once we hear this plan, we'll be able to continue this conversation forward.
And Ryan, just a follow-up question. Another stakeholder that has been mentioned in this conversation is the University of Hawaii. Some saying that they should take on a more expanded role in this new format of helping with the overall construction and design of the project. Your thoughts about the University of Hawaii's involvement in something like this, knowing that they will be one of the main users of this facility, of course, not only the only user of this facility, but one of the stakeholders involved. What are your thoughts on their role or a potential expanded role in the project?
Yeah, well, we have welcomed and will continue to welcome the university's role. As you said, they are a prime tenant, and they should have a voice in how this stadium is developed. But like you just said, they are one of many tenants. They play, on average, seven events a year. So I guess my concern is that they take a greater role is just ensuring that they're also looking out for the other broad needs that we have for the stadium. I will share with you that, I speak regularly with the athletic director at UH, David Matlin. He and I are close. In fact, we're going next week to visit the new Snapdragon Stadium at San Diego State University to really learn from them. Similar to our situation, they had to redevelop. They actually started their project around the same time as ours. And, guess what? They have a stadium today. They just opened it a few weeks ago. So we have a lot to learn from them. But yeah, I welcome their input all the way through. So.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm interested, now that this has come up again, you're sort of having to tell people again why there should be a stadium there, because now the conversation kind of goes back to zero and everyone says, well, we need housing. That's paramount over a sports facility for a lot of residents. Tell us about why you think this is an appropriate place for that, because, of course, we have the university sort of making do with the field they have. We have conversations perhaps about putting this out further west. Why do you still think that this is the best place for this project and the stadium specifically?
Yeah, we did our due diligence back in the beginning from 2017, and we started with doing a site selection study. And we said, let's clear the slate and start with all of Oahu and look at where are the best places for a new stadium, because no doubt our community does need one. And we looked at everything from UH West Oahu, Kalaeloa, even to Kapi'olani Park, and yes, University of Hawaii at Manoa, and the old, Termite Palace location in Mo'iliili. And hands down, this site still came out as being the ideal location, not just because it's at the nexus of 3 transportation areas and close to the population hub, but because this is what will help revitalize this vital community. Aiea, I think people don't realize, already has a lot of social burdens embedded in their community. And the community was really emphatic in saying, we don't want another project that's going to bisect our community like the freeway did and all of the housing and everything else. And look, we're going to accept another correctional facility. We already have a prison. They also have a high concentration of low-income housing in their area as well. What they need is to bring back a socioeconomic base. They need to revitalize the community for their own people and make it a treasure for the entire island. So this is an ideal core area to bring in, for example, innovation, sustainability, and a live, work, play environment so that our kids have somewhere to go. Aiea High School, the principal told us that 46% of the kids already are not planning to go to college, because what does that get them? There are no jobs. Well, this is something that we want to work with the Department of Education and the University of Hawaii, for example, and talk about bringing in the kinds of jobs that have internships, educational opportunities, and then jobs and a place to live. And you can't do that if you only build housing in one centric location. So that's not a healthy perspective. And I see Ryan wants to say something.
Yeah, well, I'll just add on one thing, Chris, and it's really regarding the mention of where it's built, the site, and just remind everyone that the legislation that was passed and the funding specifies that it's for a stadium in Halawa. And I know there's a lot of people talking about, why don't they just continue to use Ching Field? It meets their needs. It really doesn't. I mean, Ching Field, they did a great job, and I take my hat off if I had one for Dave Matlin and the athletics department. They did a fantastic job of getting that place up to speed. but it is a temporary facility. It's not a Division I facility. And my concern is with the schedule and timing is that the longer they play there, the greater challenges they're going to have to continue to be a D1 program, to attract, top scholar athletes to Hawaii. It's a tough situation. So again, the long-term plan should be in Halava. UH has voiced that they support that. Again, we want their continued input into that, but the money is also for a stadium in Halava.
If I could add too on the question about the University of Hawaii taking over, I just think that they are very good at their core mission, which is the university. And yes, absolutely, they have to take care of the athletic program. But the Aloha Stadium is a community asset, and that's the Stadium Authority's mission. That is how we have moved forward with all of our planning and including in our environmental impact statement. This is a community facility for community events like high school football, like graduations and fundraisers, other things that are not necessarily money-making, but are heart and core of community events. And I think that's what the Stadium Authority does so well. So that is something we don't want and expect the University of Hawaii to have to do and to have to manage. It's not their mission. So my opinion.
As we wrap up here, Chris, I'm going to ask you what may be a somewhat difficult question for you to answer, being that you are a state employee and ultimately work under the administration of the governor as a whole. But you have to address the fact that this is an election year and the governor is coming up to the end of his term with only, some 9 to 10 weeks left remaining in office. Has there been conversations with some of the gubernatorial candidates at this point in time? Have you gotten their opinion on this project and this decision from Governor Ige? And do you think that this is a decision that needs to be made by this administration as they sunset into their time here in office?
So prior to the email, we had already started our due diligence. Absolutely. Part of our work is to help transition to the next administration. So we have reached out to both of the primary gubernatorial candidates. We can't reach out to all of them. And we are in discussions with them. And so that is something we are working towards and being very mindful of. It's really not my opinion that counts and what this administration should be doing, but hey, the rest of us are working on a smooth transition to the next leadership, because I think that's how we serve the community, by making sure we can continue all the good work that we started in all of our projects for all of our missions in less than 10 weeks. It's going to happen very quickly.
Ryan, my understanding is that the Stadium Authority, that you have this meeting tomorrow. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're about to run out of time. I'll start with you and then get a final thought from Chris as well. But as you head into that meeting, what is your expectation? What is your hope for what comes out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my hope is that we can have something shared with the board in terms of what that new direction might be. Again, tied to those things I brought up early, if we get an idea of what this new project is, how does it impact schedule? How does it impact scope? And then the big question is it sounds like it's just a stadium. And I know the authority has a broader vision. They want to see this district develop too. So they're going to ask questions about the district, because as Chris mentioned earlier, that's our future revenue. And that's what makes us sustainable in the long term. And I know the authority and myself included, we do not want to be a continued burden on public funds. We don't want to have to go to the legislature every year asking for money to maintain whatever it is we build. So they're looking at the broader vision of, again, a stadium as well as the entire district, and really revitalizing this parcel.
And Chris, your thoughts, same question about the expectations coming out of tomorrow's meeting and what you would hope happens from this.
Well, I as well will be listening in to hear what our DBED team member brings, Director McCartney, as his membership in the board, because he seems to be our link to what the administration is saying, what future direction there is, and how we can support the best option for the community. And I think that's what we're listening to. We are still very much in dynamic conversations with the community and all of the stakeholders. So we wait on tenterhooks to hear what they have to say, and always open to keep sharing information and be part of the picture, to be progressive and bring a benefit to everyone.
Well, we thank you for your time this morning and your candor from both of you, Chris Kinimaka of DAGS and Ryan Andrews of Aloha Stadium. Thank you both for being here this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Ryan, very interesting, particularly to find out about how they were informed of the governor's decision. It really doesn't sound like there's been much communication or explanation for the change other than a single email up until this point. That meeting tomorrow will certainly be very interesting. We'll be waiting and watching to see what comes out of it. You heard both of them really advocating for that public-private partnership, saying that those funds are critical to maintaining, not just building the facility, but maintaining it in the long term. And just a lot of questions still outstanding.
Yeah, and of course, we referred a lot to the interview that we had with Governor Ige last week, who laid out his vision and his suggested path moving forward by removing that private sector and funding piece of this project and really just focusing on the funds that were allocated by the legislature this past session. But we heard from Chris Kinimaka talking about how in just a few years, those costs have already risen substantially due to, of course, the number of things that we're dealing with throughout the world with supply chain issues and cost of labor and such, that oftentimes, the legislature is allocating funds directly based on what the project is asking for. But as we've seen in many other public works projects, that budget and that overall funding sometimes increases and often increases. And so that would require members to go back to the legislature to ask for more funding. And so while the governor says that this has been an allotment and an allocation that has been made for this project, that cost is likely to go up and further really stating their cause and advancing their cause for the importance of this public-private partnership.
Yeah, and you heard there just talking about the need for housing, and a lot of folks really saying that this site should just be for housing. When you look at those renderings and you see what 10, 20,000, 100,000 homes or units would look like on that site, there's, of course, the community not really wanting that kind of density in that area. And also, the point being made that if we want this district to thrive, their point is that it should include more than just housing units. That's a conversation that is now being restarted. Interesting that they have spent already so much money in getting to this point, getting to that RFP, and right when they're about to launch that and put it out, putting the brakes on that. And as you noted, the current administration will be out of the Capitol in, just under 3 months. And so is this appropriate for this particular leadership to make this decision? There's a lot of questions on that as well. So a lot will come out, I think, of tomorrow's meeting, and we will be watching it very closely.
Yeah, and it's a conversation that we know many in the community are having about this project as a whole, if this is something that should even exist. But again, we heard those arguments by both of our guests today as to why this is the area that is best suited for this facility, and also from the University of Hawaii standpoint and their role moving forward of what that should be. UH does play San Diego State next week in this new stadium. I think a lot of people are hoping that this can get done in the fashion that they were able to put that up with in 2 to 3 years to build that stadium from the ground up. So we'll see the future of Aloha Stadium as these conversations continue. But thank our guests for being involved here, and thank those who have already expressed a lot of interest in this topic, because we will continue to cover it as it makes headlines. We will be actually taking Friday off. We will not be having a show on Friday. We will be resuming our conversation next week as we gear up for the elections and shining a spotlight back onto the races that are ahead.
That's right. And there are 4 city council seats that are up for grabs. And so we're going to be spending one show on each of them. We'll start off on Monday with District 6. That's Tyler Dos Santos Tam versus Tracy Taguchi. Interesting race there. And we'll be looking to see the candidates and see why they want to represent that particular district, and then going on down the line. We appreciate all of you taking part in the conversation today. Remember, you can always catch this on the Star-Advertiser's website, along with their Facebook page. Of course, catch it on Channel 50 later as a rebroadcast, or listen as a podcast. We are everywhere. So please consume this content in whatever format you like best. And we'll see you right back here on Monday for another edition of Spotlight Hawaii.
Take care. Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.